Hello, all you fantasy sports fans out there, and welcome to MFSN, the Hub's weekly live fantasy sports Q&A show. My name is Casey Scheinveld. I'll be with you for the next 45 minutes answering any questions you may have about fantasy baseball or fantasy sports in general. We're into the second full week of June. The baseball season is entering its third month already, which is crazy to think. And so everybody should have their rosters pretty well established and understand what their strengths and weaknesses are. And now is your chance to ask any questions you may have that can help you accelerate your development and become better at dominating your league. Fantasy baseball is a long, long season. It's a grind. We're into the third month, but there's still 3 more months after this. So discipline and persistence is key. Having stamina is important because otherwise you'll get burned out really easy. There is a question already. Look at that. Thank you, Mr. Mark. Ross the Boss says, should I drop Ian Kennedy for Tyler Rogers of San Fran? That's a tough question. I mean, Ian Kennedy is or has been the closer for a while. And I think last I checked that Jake McGee, and I'm just going to check, is the established closer in San Francisco, whereas Ian Kennedy is in Texas. His numbers have been good so far. How about the last couple weeks? Let's see. Not as good. He only has 1 save in the last 2 weeks, so his job could be in jeopardy. And so Tyler Rogers, I think, has better numbers right now, but I don't know if he's getting saves. Let's see. Tyler Rogers, oh, he is. Look at that. Holy cow, I was very wrong. I would definitely make that move if I were you, Ross. His numbers in this season are pretty strong. The last 2 weeks, they are better than Ian Kennedy's. He has 3 saves as opposed to 1, so it's not the worst idea. Closers are fickle. You have to be on your toes all the time when it comes to closers because bullpens seem to always be in flux in the major leagues these days. Gone are the days where you have 20 to 25 established closers in the league who teams will ride through good times and bad. You really only have probably a handful anymore of the established closer whose job is never, ever in jeopardy or never questioned. And so I don't think it's a bad idea. Obviously, Ian Kennedy does have some saves and still has some value. So if there's a way you can keep him on the roster and pick up Tyler Rogers, I might consider it. But right now, Tyler Rogers, I think, is a better value than Ian Kennedy. Patrick Wisdom. This is a great story. For those of you who don't know, Patrick Wisdom is the third baseman for the Chicago Cubs right now. He's 29. I believe he turns 30 this year. He's a journeyman. I think he's played with 4 or 5 teams and only played a total of 52 games in the majors over his career. And right now he is tearing the cover off the ball. So is he legit? It's hard to say that somebody's going to figure it out at this point and be legit. I think he's more of a streaker or streamer. We call them streakers here on MFSN, but I would certainly ride the hot streak, but I wouldn't invest heavily in him because I do think as he goes around the league a second time and teams start seeing him for a second time, they may start to figure out some holes in his swing or ways to exploit him. That's probably why he has such a limited track record in the majors up to this point. Justin Turner, I would certainly, is he hurt? Ross is asking if he should pick up Justin Turner with his waiver wire spot because somebody dropped him in one of his leagues. Unless he's hurt, I would pick him up. Absolutely. He's a professional hitter. This is a guy who's done it consistently for years now. I can think of a handful of third basemen I would want above him. Certainly he's not in the top 5, but I would guess he's in the top 10 at this point amongst third basemen. So I would absolutely add him. He's in a potent offense. He's in the Dodgers lineup, which now that Cody Bellinger is back, it seems to be clicking again. That left-handed bat in the middle of the lineup gives them a lot of potential. Mookie Betts is struggling, so Turner's production is even more important for them. So absolutely would I pick him up. And Martine Perez, is he a good streamer? I've owned Martin. Do you mean Michael Perez? Let me see. Let's see if I can find him here. I'm not even seeing that guy. Let's see. He's a pitcher, I believe. Martine Perez. There he is. It's the accent it's the tilde that I was missing. All right. The last 2 weeks, Martine Perez has a really good whip, ERA. He doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. He only has, he's averaging less than a strikeout per inning, which won't kill you if you have some other strikeouts on your roster. But historically, he has not been a reliable pitcher. I would certainly ride the hot streak, and he's on Boston, whose offense is producing like crazy. And so he could be a cheap source of wins for you. And as long as he's pitching well, he's a left-handed pitcher, I believe. So I wouldn't pitch him against right-handed heavy lineups. He could be more of a matchup kind of guy, but he's certainly worth rostering at this point. Patrick Corbin is droppable. I don't know how else to say it. He and Luis Castillo, to me, have been two of the biggest disappointments in fantasy baseball for starting pitchers up to this point. Both were expected to be great value. Neither have delivered. I think Castillo had a decent outing his last time out, but in general, he's been very disappointing. Patrick Corbin was formerly a 200 strikeout guy when he signed that big contract with the Nationals. I remember being a Yankees fan when the Yankees offered him a contract too, hopeful he would come to us. I think at this point, I'm glad he chose the Nationals because he's their headache now. I would probably drop him, see if you can trade him because his name still gives some value. So find maybe a more naive manager in your league and try to sell him on the upside and the potential. But yeah, I would drop him. Ross, I can't tell if you're being serious. Did somebody really drop Manny Machado in your league? Yeah, you absolutely pick up a perennial all-star who has produced at the highest level for years and is still only like 28 or 29 years old. I would pick him up in a heartbeat. Jose Abreu for Jesse Winker. That's a tough one. I like Jesse Winker better at this point. I mean, he just hit 3 bombs the other day. He's tearing the cover off the ball, and he was always known when he was coming up as kind of like a Joey Votto light, an on-base percentage guy who had a real knack for the strike zone and not chasing. So the profile was always there for him to be a producer, an offensive producer at a high level. What he's doing now is absurd. I would have to bet he's in the top 2 or 3 in the MVP vote right now with Tatis and Ronald Acuna Jr. there in the NL. Jose Abreu plays first base, though. I don't know if Winker has first base eligibility, and first base is it's slim. I think it depends what you have on your bench behind him. If you have another first baseman who you can run out there who is providing decent offense, it doesn't have to be Vladimir Guerrero Jr. level offense, but somebody who's providing you decent numbers, maybe a Yuli Gurriel who's hitting the ball well right now, or if you have Jared Walsh, absolutely, that makes Abreu expendable. And I would try to get Winker, although I have a feeling Winker is going to be pretty hard to get right now with how hot he was. Randy Arozarena is available too. Would I drop Avisail Garcia for him? Wow. Arozarena gives you speed. Garcia does not. Garcia is probably going to be a little more consistent, but Arozarena has that kind of lottery ticket value where he can go on a hot streak and rattle off home runs and stolen bases really quickly in a way that can help you climb in your leagues pretty fast. I don't know if I would drop Garcia for him, but it would certainly be really tempting. Garcia is having a nice year, but Arozarena certainly has a higher ceiling. I think if I was looking at it as a lottery ticket, if I had 3 other solid outfielders, I would probably drop Garcia for Arozarena just in case he gets hot. If I'm relying on one to be my second or third outfielder, it would be a much tougher call. I actually have a question from my son. Shout out to Jackson. Thanks, Jack. What pitcher would I recommend the most? Who's the best pitcher in fantasy baseball right now? I don't think there's any argument that it's Jacob Degrom from the New York Mets, Jack. As much as we're Yankees fans, I got to give my props to the team in Queens on the other side of the city, because Jacob Degrom is just, I think he's in a league all his own where nobody can pitch the way he does. His ERA, his whip, his strikeouts, everything is insane. The guy is just far and away the best pitcher. Garrett Cole is a consideration, Garrett Cole of the Yankees, but Garrett Cole struggled his last time out. There's a lot of rumblings that he was one of the guys who was benefiting from the foreign substance on the ball topic. And now that the league is cracking down on that, they're wondering if his spin rate is decreased. So he might not be getting as much value, but Jacob Degrom is just insane. I have another question from Ross. Thanks, Ross. I was offered Trevor Bauer and Mark Canha for Buxton and Liam Hendricks, 5x5 head-to-head league. If I take it, I'd basically be punting saves. Man, Buxton just went out on his rehab assignment. So he could be coming back in the next 4 or 5 days. It's like you hung on to him for the part where he was completely unhelpful, and now you're giving him up, even though when he was playing, he was arguably the best outfielder in baseball when he was in the lineup. The problem with Buxton is 2 weeks from now, he could get hurt again. If Liam Hendricks is your only closer, you're practically punting saves already. So I might do it just because of that. In a head-to-head league, in 5x5 head-to-head league, you're really looking. So that what that means to people out there is that there's 10 possible points that you can get every week against your opponent. And so saves is only 1 point. So essentially what he's saying is he'd be punting 1 point, but getting Trevor Bauer, who by all accounts is a true ace, and Mark Canha in Oakland, who's hitting the ball well. He's no Byron Buxton. And so if this would give you multiple points, if it would give you multiple points in wins, ERA, and strikeouts, if you think it's what's going to send you over the edge to give you those 3 points on a week-to-week basis with Trevor Bauer, then it's probably worth it. Because with Buxton, like I said, you could get dynamic numbers, but you could also get an entire season of trips to the IL where he's missing 2 to 3 weeks at a time and just frustrating you. So I would do it if I'm willing to punt that one category, which I might do. Rafael Devers for Cedric Mullins and Sandy Alcantara, 12-man head-to-head. Wow, that is tough. Rafael Devers, it's not a keeper league. I think if it was a keeper league, it's a no-brainer that you hang on to Devers, just because I think he might be the best young third baseman in baseball the way he's hitting right now amongst some great third basemen. Sandy Alcantara is pitching out of his mind in Miami right now. I think he just went eight scoreless innings in his last start. Miami, props to my man Derek Jeter, former Yankee there. He's building something special. We all questioned why he traded for Jazz Chisholm. He traded Zach. I'm blocking on his name. The pitcher in Arizona. I'll look it up. Hold on. Zach Gallen. I'm sorry. I figured it out. For Jazz Chisholm, which seemed weird, but Chisholm is pitching incredible, and Jeter has, and the Marlins have an incredible pitching staff in place right now with Rogers and Alcantara. So I might do it if I had, again, a good backup third baseman, but getting rid of Devers is tough. Jack, another question. What outfielder would you not recommend? Almost any outfielder on the New York Yankees, it seems, right now is not a good one. But if I was not recommending an outfielder right now, somebody who is highly valued and who is dropping, ironically, Dr. Dan then asked about Juan Soto, who has been struggling this year, but is one of the best young outfielders. That's not the one I would not recommend. I think if I was not recommending an outfielder, it would be Joey Gallo. I'm just not a fan of his game. It's low average, high power, but I'm not a fan of somebody who strikes out that much and is that highly valued with a strikeout. So it'd probably be Joey Gallo in Texas. Although I was reading the other day that the Padres might be interested in him, so he could be switching. What do I think of Juan Soto? I'm a Juan Soto fan. I know he started slow, but I believe he's going to turn it around. I believe he's still going to end up with close to or around a 300 average and 30 home runs. He might get close to 90 RBIs and runs scored. He was hurt a little bit and he started off sluggish, but I'm a believer in his profile. So I would definitely try to get him if there's an owner in your league who is willing to part with him because he's struggling. So if you think he's undervalued, I would make a pitch for him. Is Mccutchen worth picking up, or who's an under the radar outfielder pickup? I like Andrew Mccutchen. I think it will help him when the offense in Philadelphia starts producing, because he's a good on-base percentage guy who can score a lot of runs. He's not the MVP from his Pittsburgh days. He's not going to be a 20-20 or 30-30 guy, but he can get you in the teens in both home runs and steals and score a bunch of runs. So I'm a fan of him. Under the radar outfielder right now, geez, there's a lot. We talked about Avisail Garcia. I think he's an under the radar guy who's producing in Milwaukee right now that's worth owning. I think one of the most undervalued is Verdugo in Boston. I think he's a real legit young outfield stud who's just getting better. And people know about him, but they think of him as the kind of the payoff in the Mookie Betts trade, not really how good he is. So he's one I would consider. Another one who I think is doing pretty well. Let's see. I like Dylan Carlson and Tyler O'Neill in St. Louis. I think they're both undervalued and young guys who have a lot of potential, who are doing good things, but might not get the press because they're in St. Louis, which doesn't always make the biggest headlines. Austin Meadows has arguably been, over the past 2 to 3 weeks, the best offensive outfielder in baseball. And so he's another one that might be still undervalued, and it's worth overpaying for him. Walsh for Yellich. Gosh, I own Yellich in my keeper league. I love Yellich. I've had him for 3 years or 4 years after I had him earlier than that. He's struggling. And Walsh, people keep saying he's going to cool down, but I haven't seen him cool down yet. And so if I was getting Walsh in that deal, I would probably pull the trigger to get a first baseman who's producing like that. Just again, because of position depth. And Yellich, he may never return to the 30-30, 320 guy that he was 2-3 years ago. We don't know. Chronic back issues always worry me in terms of a swing, because a batter, because of the pronation you need to do a baseball swing. So that's something I would consider. Who do you think will be the next fantasy star? Jack, you are just coming with all the best questions. Thanks, buddy. Well, I think Wander Franco is going to be up pretty soon in Tampa Bay. He's the number one prospect in baseball. And so it's hard to bet against him being a star. Sorry, coughing. He's a great bet. Somebody who's in the majors right now, I just mentioned Alex Verdugo. I think he could be. I think Trent Grisham in San Diego could end up being a fantasy stud here in the next 2 weeks. And somebody who's really undervalued that's doing really well is Jake Cronenworth in San Diego. There's some really good players who could quickly become fantasy stars. I think Bo Bichette is already a fantasy star, but he could even take it to the next level. So, Jack, there's a lot of great players out there. I was just offered Julio Urias and Yimi Garcia for Hader. Is this the same one where you're trading? Ross, you're in so many leagues. Is this the same one where you're trading Liam Hendricks? I need a quality starting pitcher, but my closers would be Garcia and Ian Kennedy. What are your thoughts? Yeah, Hader's has the best stuff, I think, in baseball to be a closer. And so you're giving up a lot. Julio Urias is a great young starter. He struggled a little bit in the last month, but he's still, I think, the second best or third best starter on the Dodgers. So National League, good pitcher's park, great offensive around him. I like Urias. I think Garcia for Hader is the big switch. But you have to look at it this way. If it's not a keeper league, let's see, we're 3 months in. So over the next 3 months, if Hader has, 28 saves in the next 3 months, and Garcia has 21 or 20 if he hangs on to the job, you're really getting a much better starting pitcher and only giving up 6 or 7 saves, which is less than 1 a week. And in a head-to-head league, I think that might be worth it if you conceptualize it that way and look at it that way. So I would probably pull the trigger on that one. Why am I so tan? Well, Dan, it's been really hot out in Pennsylvania for the last couple weeks, and my son plays baseball and my daughter plays soccer, so I spend a lot of time outside. Fortunately, this is a clothing required show, in my opinion, so you don't see the farmer's tan that I have because of that, but my face looks very tan. So there you go. Bold prediction. Hunter Renfroe produces solid numbers for the remainder of the season. In the last 2 weeks, I think he's ranked in the top 20 or 30 in fantasy baseball. He's batting in a Boston lineup where it just seems like they're scoring runs in bunches. He's not going to steal you any bags, but I think he's averaging scoring almost over a run per game, which is crazy when you think about it. So I think it's a bold prediction, but I don't think it's that bold that he produces solid numbers. A bold prediction would say he's a top 20 outfielder for the remainder of the season, which is definitely a possibility. Dr. Dan, you absolutely can fix back issues. If you don't know any better, go to Crushing Doubt, where he looks at the mind-body connection and is an excellent therapist at helping you work through body physical issues that you can control through mind training, through therapeutic interventions that he has mastered and is willing to teach and pass along. So absolutely, Dr. Dan, you can fix it. If Christian Yellich, if you're watching, go to Crushing Doubt, reach out to Dr. Dan or our producer, Greg. They both will hook you up and we will make you our spokesman forever. For keeper and dynasty owners, is anyone holding on to Marcell Ozuna for 2022? Man, I wouldn't. He's going to be a pariah, I think, in the league for at least the next year or two. I think there's so many outfielders out there that unless if you're keeping, maybe in dynasty you can hang on to him, but in keeper leagues, I think he's gone for the rest of this year, and his suspension, if it's as bad as it sounds like it is, his suspension will probably run into 2022 as well. They haven't even suspended him yet. I'm assuming he's going to be a hard guy to pick up because teams are going to be worried about the fan base's reaction to owning him, given the felony charges. So I wouldn't recommend it. Maybe in dynasty leagues, because in dynasty leagues, you end up keeping just about everybody, but in a keeper league, he wouldn't be one of my 5 or 6 keepers that I would select. Will Myers and drop Jared Kelenic. Wow, that's interesting. Kelenic was, for those of you who don't know, we were gleeful here at MFSN in some ways, which is inappropriate, I guess, that Jared Kelenic was just sent back down to the minors because I think he's hitting under 100 and striking out like over 40% of his at-bats or 50% of his at-bats. So he's really struggled. He's a superstar prospect who has a really high ceiling. I think it was premature to think he would hit the ground running. If it's a redraft league, I would absolutely keep Will Myers over him. In a keeper league or a dynasty league, I'm not so sure. I think Will Myers is a guy you can pick up anytime in the year. He ends up on a waiver wire, I assume, every year because he does go through prolonged slumps where he is just not producing. But historically, he's a guy who can get you 20 home runs and steal you almost 20 bases. So there's value there. But given his injury history and the streakiness in which he plays, if it was a keeper league or a dynasty league, I would keep Kelenic over him. Alex Wood, is he droppable? Well, he's not the closer. So I don't know what he's done recently. Let me look it up. Is he in San Francisco? I'm forgetting. Or is he in Toronto? I think he's in San Francisco. Alex Wood is in San Francisco. He's pitched terrible the last 2 weeks. So, and the last 30 days, let's see at the numbers. He hasn't been great for the last month. He still has a 4.7 ERA and a 1.4 whip. Alex Wood has always been a control issue kind of guy. And so, yeah, I would say he's droppable. 1.4 whip isn't going to help you at all. A 4.7 ERA, which is what he's had in the last month. I know that San Francisco has had the Midas touch with regards to pitchers, but it doesn't seem to be helping Alex Wood right now. And while we're on the topic of San Francisco, very sad news, obviously, to hear about Evan Longoria. They're saying he can miss up to 12 weeks after his collision with Brendan Crawford the other day. He has been amazing. He found the fountain of youth this year in San Francisco and was just an absolute fantasy monster and a real baseball monster. So it's sad because he's one of the veterans who you'd like to root for. So hopefully he recovers quickly and can get back to producing again. Would you keep Christian Yellich? Yes or no? Jack, of course you keep Christian Yellich, buddy. You can't drop him. I'm just saying I don't think he's as valuable as he used to be. He still has the potential at any time to go on a streak where he hits 10, 15, 20 home runs over the course of a couple months and is batting 300. He's that talented of a hitter. I wouldn't drop him. I wouldn't even bench him at this point unless you have three really solid outfielders in front of him, which, depending on how you drafted and when you drafted, you would have to have some of those undervalued guys who you got late in the draft who are really producing, the Alex Ferdugo types. Chris Taylor is another one who qualifies all over the place and is putting up good numbers in LA. But no, I don't think you drop Christian Yellich. I think you hang on to him. Would you trade Blake Snell for Nelson Cruz Jr.? I'm a Blake Snell fan. I've been a Blake Snell owner for years. Until this year, I traded him, fortunately, because he's really struggled in San Diego this year. I believe his last start out was good, but he's had such control issues, and they've been barreling the ball on him like crazy. But Nelson Cruz, he's been hurt on and off. He's day-to-day, I think, right now, too, when I last checked. And he only qualifies at utility. So if you don't have anybody else to put in that utility spot, and it's not a keeper league, Nelson Cruz is certainly a worthwhile player to have in that respect. But I don't know if I would trade Blake Snell for him. I would try to find another way to trade for Nelson Cruz. His value is always lower than it should be because he's utility only. So he only qualifies in one spot on your entire roster, which really hurts somebody's value. If I'm trying to trade Zach Gallen for an outfielder, who can I get? Zach Gallen is, for those of you who don't know, a really, really talented young pitcher in Arizona who unfortunately went down recently, started the season with a fracture in his forearm and coming out of spring training, and then went down with forearm tightness. And now, according to what I've read, he's not supposed to be recommended to get Tommy John surgery, but you never know. I think he's starting a rehab assignment here soon, but his value is going to be lower than it should. Who should you target as an outfielder if you need one? Wow, that's a tough call. Let's see. Who would I look at if I were outfielders? Obviously, if you can get a really good player, it'd be a hard pull, but let's see. I would look at a Mark Canha type is a good pick, a Chris Taylor type. If it's a keeper league, I think I hold on to Zach Gallen unless I can get maybe a Ryan Mountcastle who's been playing really well in the outfield. I like Andrew Benintendi. I picked him as a bounce back guy, and he's been pitching pretty well. Hitting pretty well there in Kansas City. So he's somebody I would consider too for Zach Gallen. It's going to be tough though. Where is the fountain of youth? Apparently it's somewhere in San Francisco. I haven't been there in 20 years or 15 years, so I don't know much about the city, but it is definitely somewhere in the Bay Area because it's just crazy. What first baseman is emerging this year into keeper status? Well, I think we mentioned him earlier, and that's Jared Walsh. I think at this point, he is proving he's a keeper. I like Pavin Smith in Arizona. I'm not sure if he's a keeper yet. I think he would have to keep it up over the whole season and then prove it again next season. Jared Walsh had a really good season last year, albeit a short season because of COVID, but he's just carried it over this year and he's not slowing down. He's hitting lefties even. It's not like they're platooning him. They were willing to release, for crying out loud, Albert Pujols to ensure that they could get Jared Walsh in the lineup every day. I think he is definitely somebody who is turning into a keeper there. Other one, where else might there be somebody developing into a keeper? That's really tough. I'm not sure. Honestly, I think more people are more first basemen are turning into questionable who were keepers in the past. The Peter Alonsos and the, Luke Voigt, these guys who over the last 2 years or 3 years said, hey, I'm a keeper and looked like the real deal. Now they're struggling more. So first base is a shallow position. Does Trey Mancini qualify at first? I mean, he might be actually playing his way into that conversation. Let's see. He does qualify at first. I think, not only is he probably the greatest comeback story of the year and somebody we all root for, he's just been really, really consistent and strong. I'm not sure if he's a keeper, but if he plays well the rest of the year, he becomes part of that conversation. Blake Snell looks like he could be a vampire. I haven't seen him in a while. I don't know if he has the widow's peak and the fangs, but I'm glad I don't own him this year. I'll say that. So many injuries. I'm running out of my 6 ads every week by Wednesday, setting a record for waiver wire pickups this year. Yeah, this has been a year of attrition more than anything else. I'm not sure if it's because there wasn't a full season last year, so players are getting hurt more. But it seems like not only are players getting hurt, but it's these big name players. I mean, you look at like who is on the IL, and it's literally perennial all-stars who are in the primes of their career. You're talking Mike Trout. You're talking Trevor Story. You're looking at pitching wise. You have Noah Syndergaard. You have Zach Gallen, who we just mentioned. You have Luis Severino. You have Chris Sale. Like these. Now, some of them have been out from the year previous, but it's crazy who's getting hurt. Jack Flaherty, who was one of the best pitchers in the National League, just went out with an oblique strain. You got it's insane, the players who are getting hurt. Byron Buxton, we talked about. Bryce Harper was out for a while. Fernando Tatis has been in and out of the lineup. It is a day where it is a year where you better have bench depth and you better be quick to the wire because the best players seem to all be getting hurt at different points. What closing pitcher would you recommend the most? Jackson, I love it. Great question. Well, we talked about Josh Hader. He's great. I think we mentioned Liam Hendricks earlier in a trade discussion. His numbers are really good in Chicago. Aroldis Chapman has been almost untouchable this year. He found his fastball again. He's up into the triple digits. He developed a changeup, which has been really impressive. His slider has always been a good pitch. The Yankees just need to score because he's not getting a lot of opportunities. They've been terrible. I like Diego Castillo in Tampa Bay. I think he's going to hold on to that job. But there's a lot of flux amongst closers. I think Ryan Presley is a good closer in Houston. He's somebody who's safe and reliable. So there are some good closers, but then you get into some of the situations where you're just not sure who's going to get the saves. We talked about San Francisco earlier with their closing situation. You got Cincinnati, who has Lucas Sims, Amir Garrett. They have names of people who are doing well and then struggling and doing well and struggling. Cleveland had Clase, who pitched awesome for the first month and a half of the season or month of the season. Then they put in Karinchak, who seemed unhittable, but in the last 2 weeks, it seems like he's giving up a runner or two every time he's out there pitching. So it is hard to find that closer who you can just pencil in and day out and trust that they're going to give you numbers. Dylan Bundy was cut in my league. Is he worth a pickup? He pitched well last night or 2 nights ago. I think over 5 innings, only 2 earned runs. It was a solo home run and then some other way he gave up runs. But I don't trust him yet. I own him, but he sits on my bench until he can string together 2 or 3 quality starts in a row. He has a track record for doing it. So if he does string them together, you're going to want to own him. If you have room on your bench to stash him because of IL, again, injuries, or because you just have a lot of room for starting pitching, he might be worth a stash, but I wouldn't play him yet. No. Who's the best catcher right now in fantasy? Wow, that's a good question. Who's the best catcher? Let's see. Who would I take if I could take any catcher? Right now, it's everybody thought it was going to be JT Realmuto, but he's been struggling. I'm going to say, and he's not a natural catcher, but I'm going to say Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, because he plays in Texas where they play him in the infield as much, if not more, than they play him at catcher. And he can steal bags, and he doesn't hurt you in average or runs scored. He's not going to hit as many home runs as a Salvador Perez or a Yasmani Grandal, but he's going to get you steals out of the catcher position, which is crazy valuable. And so I would probably put he, to me, as the most valuable catcher. After him, it's probably in that Will Smith, Salvador Perez, JT Realmuto. You can clump them all together. Realmuto gives you the most potential, the highest ceiling, because of his well-rounded game offensively. But I like Kiner-Falefa a lot. And I actually like Yachty. I'm a Yachty or Molina fan. I think he's chronically underrated just because he's not a power hitter, but he always hits for a decent average. He's been hurt a couple times this year, but he's pretty reliable. So I would go with him. If you are in a pinch pitcher-wise, who should you pick up? Wow. Well, let's look at who's available in Yahoo right now. All pitchers. Let's see. In my league, let's see who's available. We talked about Martine Perez. He's been pitching well. He's available. Man, it's hard. If he's pitching away from Colorado, I really like German Marquez. His numbers when he pitches on the road are insane, but he's a guy who doesn't pitch well in the high altitude, so he might be somebody you have to leave on your bench for home starts. And another guy I like just pitched a complete game against the Yankees, which might not be saying much, but it's still, as a lefty, it is Ryan Yarbrough in Tampa Bay. Not a great pitcher, not going to give you out-of-the-world numbers, but he's also not going to hurt you in any category. And I think that sometimes can be just as valuable. So, Jack, another great question from you. Thanks for that. So let's see. Any other questions? Not right now. So what should we talk about? We have about 5 minutes left. Oh, by the way, I haven't said this yet, so let me say it now. If you like what you're watching, please like this video. Click subscribe to the channel so you can get all of our content. Click the bell for notifications so you get notified if there's any new content coming out. And of course, as you've been doing all along, you've been putting in comments. But add general comments too, not just questions. Comments about your thoughts about the show, ways we can improve it, things we can do better. We're very open to any comments, and we'll respond and give thoughtful consideration to anything that you guys say. So please join us for more shows. You know, it's interesting. I've been doing fantasy baseball I hate to admit it, but 30 years now. I first started when I was 14 years old. So that was 1990. That's how long ago it has been. And I was going through the other day, I was trying to think back to kind of my fondest memories from fantasy baseball. And I have a couple. I remember we drafted, this had to be 96 or 97. I don't know if somebody wants to go through and look. There was a draft. We had a keeper league, and you kept 11 players or 10 players. And so it was a big keeper league. And we drafted the day after opening day. And opening day was huge, obviously, in baseball. It's one of my favorite days of the year. But there was a center fielder for the Chicago Cubs, and I'm blanking on the year. Maybe I'll look it up here. His name was Tuffy Rhodes. And he hit, I believe, 3 home runs on opening day for the Cubs in 1995, maybe. Let's see. Tuffy Rhodes. And he ended up going first overall over the likes of some people who ended up being perennial all-stars, all because he hit 3 home runs opening day. I mean, I think Kerry Wood was available in that draft. You had players like back then there was Paul Wilson and Bill Pulsipher were really big names for the New York Mets. That's how far back we go. It was amazing. But Tuffy Rhodes hit 3 home runs opening day, and the guy who had first pick felt like he won the lottery drafting him. And I would bet it was opening day in 1994. And then he went on to hit just a total of 13 home runs during his entire career, which was kind of, you hit 3 in one day and then you hit 10 the rest of your career. And that was the waste of a first pick. We had a draft a few years ago in our league that Dr. Dan and I have been in for the better part of 10 or 15 years, where Scott Kingery went first overall when there were some huge names in the draft. And Scott Kingery was just outrighted. He actually cleared waivers. He was outrighted back to Philadelphia's minors because he's been so ineffective. And so it speaks to how difficult it is to predict who's going to break out, who's not going to break out, when to take risk and when not to take risk. And so it's fantasy baseball is tough. It's a challenge, but that's what makes it so great. It's a long season, which is a grind, and it can be overwhelming at times, but it also allows you to take those risks and make those mistakes, because then you have months to make up for it. The draft in football, in fantasy football is incredibly important because you only have 16 games. And if you don't get the draft right, it's really hard to create or modify your roster to make it dominant or successful. In baseball, you can make a lot of missteps in the draft, but because you have 5 months and there's so many games and the waiver wire can be so robust and you have prospects and you have the potential for trades, it allows you to really invest in the game and spend the summer improving your roster, which to me makes it the best fantasy sport out there, in my opinion. Not that I don't like fantasy football. I really enjoy it, but fantasy baseball to me is just the most enjoyable in that respect. You don't have Tuesday, Wednesday, most Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays where there's nothing going on and you're not able to really see how your players are doing. Every day in baseball, you have somebody who you can watch their stats and look at their matchups and see if they can help you and see if they can develop. It's a really, really great sport fantasy wise. I think it fulfills all of, for me, my desire that I always wanted to be the GM of a professional baseball team. This is probably the closest I'm going to get. So I really relish the opportunities in these keeper leagues and dynasty leagues of developing a roster over time. And so I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. I hope you're as passionate about fantasy baseball as I am. Again, my name is Casey Scheinvold. You'll hear me referred to as Vlad to the Bone because I am a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. fan. I've owned him on my keeper league for over 3 years now, and now he's finally producing as the fantasy monster that I had thought he would become. We love bringing you this content. Please comment. Please like our shows. Please subscribe. Please ring the bell. Keep coming back, and we will keep providing you the best content we can.
We're gonna set the internet on